Have you ever felt betrayed, abandoned, pushed to the brink of despair? This video will take you on a breathtaking journey as one man battles the deepest darkness of the human heart. You will be amazed by his resilience, shocked by his bold decisions, and seething at the injustices. Dare to face your feelings, dare to share your story, and dare to believe that you are not alone. Act now, comment, share, and discover your inner strength. The biting wind whipped at Jonathan Walker's face, a stinging reminder of the chill that permeated every aspect of his life. He stood at the precipice of Whistler Mountain, the jagged peaks piercing the sky like icy daggers, a breathtaking panorama that usually filled him with awe. Today, however, the majestic landscape only served to amplify the gnawing resentment that festered within him. John, a prodigiously talented snowboarder, was a force to be reckoned with on the slopes. His fluid movements, his daring aerials, his innate connection with the mountain, it was a symphony of skill and passion. Yet his brilliance was perpetually overshadowed by the looming presence of his younger brother, Michael. Mike, the golden boy, the family's darling, the one who could do no wrong. The Walker name was synonymous with snowboarding royalty in Whistler. Their lineage was a tapestry woven with victories, sponsorships, and an almost mythical status in the tight-knit community. But behind the veneer of perfection, a dark undercurrent flowed, a current of blatant favoritism that had shaped John's entire existence. Mike, despite his mediocre skills and penchant for reckless behavior, was showered with praise and opportunities. The latest gear, the best coaches, the most lucrative endorsements, all were readily available to him. John, on the other hand, had to claw his way to every shred of recognition, every sponsorship deal, every hard-earned victory. The injustice gnawed at him, a constant, dull ache that never seemed to subside. He remembered the countless hours spent practicing, honing his skills, pushing his limits, while Mike partied and squandered his potential. He recalled the sting of his parents' dismissive glances, their unwavering belief in Mike's inherent superiority. "John, you need to be more supportive of your brother," his mother would say, her voice laced with a subtle reprimand. "He's going through a rough patch." A rough patch, Mike's life was a perpetual rough patch, a series of self-inflicted disasters that were always excused, always forgiven. John, meanwhile, was expected to be the stoic one, the reliable one, the one who never complained. He clenched his fists, the rough texture of his gloves, a stark contrast to the smooth, icy surface of his snowboard. He was tired of being the unsung hero, the shadow lurking behind the golden boy. He was tired of the whispers, the knowing glances, the pitying smiles. "Hey, Jonathan, you gonna join us for the after-party?" Mike's voice, laced with a familiar arrogance, cut through his thoughts. John turned to see his brother approaching, a smug grin plastered on his face. Mike, with his tousled blonde hair and effortless charm, was the epitome of privilege. "Nah, I've got an early training session tomorrow," John replied, his voice flat. "Come on, loosen up." "You're always so serious," Mike scoffed, throwing an arm around John's shoulder. "Live a little." John shrugged off his brother's touch, a wave of revulsion washing over him. "I've got better things to do than waste my time partying." "Whatever," Mike sneered, his eyes flashing with irritation. "You're always so uptight. No wonder you don't have any friends." The words hit John like a physical blow. He wanted to lash out, to wipe that smug grin off Mike's face. But he knew it was pointless. Mike would never understand. He was too consumed by his own self-importance, too blinded by the unwavering adoration of their parents. John turned away, his gaze drawn to the vast expanse of the mountains. He felt a profound sense of isolation, a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the ski resort. He was alone, adrift in a sea of indifference, his talent and hard work constantly overshadowed by his brother's undeserved glory. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the snow-covered peaks, John made a silent vow. He would not let Mike's shadow define him. He would rise above the injustice, carve his own path, and prove to the world that he was more than just the brother of the golden boy. He was Jonathan Walker, and he would not be denied. The biting winds of Whistler had a way of stripping away pretense, revealing the raw essence of a person. For Jonathan Walker, they unveiled a loneliness that had long been buried beneath layers of resentment and ambition. Then came Sarah Miller, a whirlwind of warmth and vitality, a beacon of light in the icy wilderness. Sarah, a seasoned ski instructor, with eyes that sparkled like the freshly fallen snow, possessed an infectious energy that captivated John from the moment they met. She moved with an effortless grace, her laughter echoing through the mountain air like a melodious symphony. She saw beyond the hardened exterior, the stoic mask John had meticulously crafted, and recognized the vulnerability that lay beneath. Their connection was instantaneous, a spark ignited amidst the frozen landscape. They spent hours together, sharing stories, dreams, and a mutual passion for the mountains. Sarah's presence was a balm to John's wounded soul, a gentle reminder that he was worthy of love and happiness. The warmth of the lodge, with its crackling fireplace and cozy ambiance, became their sanctuary. It was a place where they could escape the harsh realities of their lives, where John could shed the weight of his family's expectations and simply be himself. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside, casting a shimmering glow upon the landscape, John found himself gazing into Sarah's eyes, a profound sense of peace washing over him. He realized that he had fallen deeply in love, a love that transcended the bitterness and resentment that had plagued his past. 4 years flew by, a tapestry woven with shared adventures, whispered secrets, and unwavering support. Sarah was his anchor, his confidant, his soulmate. He knew with unwavering certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. He planned the proposal meticulously, choosing a secluded spot overlooking the valley, where the mountains stretched out like a majestic, snow-covered kingdom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, he knelt before her, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Sarah," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "you've brought light into my life, a light that I never thought possible. You've shown me what it means to be loved, to be cherished. You're my best friend, my confidant, my everything. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Sarah's eyes welled up with tears, her lips curving into a radiant smile. "Yes, Jonathan. 1,000 times, yes." Their embrace was a fusion of warmth and love, a promise of a future filled with happiness and shared dreams. But as they celebrated their engagement, a shadow loomed on the horizon. John knew that his family would not approve of his choice. They had always viewed Sarah as an outsider, a distraction from his true potential. He braced himself for the inevitable confrontation, the barrage of disapproval and thinly veiled insults. He knew that his decision to marry Sarah would be a declaration of independence, a defiant stand against the toxic dynamics that had plagued his life. "Jonathan, you're making a grave mistake," his mother's voice echoed in his mind, laced with a familiar condescension. "Sarah is not the right woman for you. She's not from our world." "Our world?" John scoffed, his voice filled with a newfound defiance. "Our world is a world of favoritism and manipulation. I'm done living in your shadow, Mike's shadow. I'm building my own life, with Sarah by my side." The tension crackled in the air, a silent battle waged between love and loyalty, between independence and obligation. John knew that his decision would come at a cost, but he was willing to pay the price. He had found his happiness, his sanctuary, his warmth in the heart of the icy wilderness, and he would not let anyone extinguish that flame. The crisp mountain air, once a symbol of freedom and exhilaration, now felt suffocating, heavy with an unspoken tension that hung between Jonathan and Sarah. A subtle shift had occurred, a gradual erosion of the warmth and intimacy that had defined their relationship. Sarah, once vibrant and effervescent, now seemed distant, her eyes clouded with a secret she couldn't bear to share. Jonathan, with his keen intuition honed by years of navigating the treacherous slopes of Whistler, sensed the change. He noticed the furtive glances, the hushed phone calls, the inexplicable late-night absences. He tried to brush aside his growing unease, attributing it to the stress of wedding planning, but the nagging suspicion persisted, a cold dread that gnawed at his heart. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in their cozy lodge, the silence stretched taut, heavy with unspoken words. Jonathan reached for Sarah's hand, his touch tentative, his eyes searching hers. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "You've been acting strange lately. Is everything all right?" Sarah's eyes flickered away, her lips trembling. She pulled her hand away, her movements jerky and unnatural. "Nothing's wrong, Jonathan," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm just tired." But Jonathan wasn't convinced. He saw the fear in her eyes, the guilt that weighed heavily on her shoulders. He knew she was hiding something, something that threatened to shatter the fragile peace they had built. The truth, when it finally surfaced, was as brutal and unforgiving as an avalanche. Sarah, his Sarah, the woman he loved with all his heart, was pregnant. And the child was not his. It was Mike's. The revelation hit Jonathan like a physical blow, a crushing weight that sent him reeling. He felt the blood drain from his face, his heart pounding in his ears, a deafening drumbeat of betrayal. The world around him blurred, the cozy lodge transforming into a cold, desolate wasteland. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "How could you do this to me?" Sarah's tears streamed down her face, her body racked with sobs. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan," she pleaded, her voice choked with remorse. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. But her words were hollow, empty apologies that offered no solace. Jonathan felt a searing rage building within him, a volcanic eruption of pain and betrayal. He wanted to scream, to shatter the silence with his fury, but he was frozen, trapped in a vortex of disbelief and heartbreak. The trust he had placed in Sarah, the love he had nurtured, the future he had envisioned, all lay in ruins, shattered into a million pieces. He felt like he was falling, plummeting into a bottomless crevasse of despair, the icy walls closing in around him, suffocating him with their cold indifference. The warmth of the lodge, once a symbol of their love, now felt like a cruel mockery. The crackling fireplace, the soft glow of the lamps, the gentle snowfall outside, all served as a stark reminder of the happiness that had been so cruelly stolen from him. Jonathan's world had been turned upside down, his foundation shaken to its core. The betrayal was not just a personal affront, it was a violation of everything he held dear. It was a cruel twist of fate, a tragic irony that his brother, the golden boy, the one who had always taken everything from him, had now stolen the one person he loved most. The air in the Walker family's opulent chalet crackled, with a tension thicker than the smoke curling from the fireplace. Jonathan stood before his brother, Mike, the embodiment of entitled arrogance, the architect of his heartbreak. The confrontation was inevitable, a storm brewing in the aftermath of Sarah's devastating revelation. "How could you, Mike?" Jonathan's voice was a low growl, laced with a raw fury he had never known. "How could you betray me like this?" Mike, instead of offering remorse, met his gaze with a defiant smirk. "Betray you? I didn't betray you, Jonathan. Sarah and I, we have a connection, something you wouldn't understand." "A connection?" Jonathan scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You call sleeping with my fiancé a connection?" "Look, things happen." Mike shrugged, his tone dismissive. "It's not my fault Sarah couldn't resist me." Jonathan's rage surged, a tidal wave threatening to consume him. He lunged at Mike, his fists clenched, but before he could land a blow, their parents intervened, their voices sharp and condemning. "Jonathan, stop this madness!" their father bellowed, his face flushed with anger. "You're acting like a child." "A child?" Jonathan spat, his eyes blazing. "I'm the child? He sleeps with my fiancé, and I'm the child. Mike made a mistake, their mother interjected, her voice laced with a familiar condescension. But you need to forgive him. He's your brother. Family is more important than anything. Family! Jonathan's laughter was bitter, devoid of mirth. You call this a family? A family that favors one child over the other? A family that condones betrayal. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, a stark indictment of the toxic dynamics that had plagued their lives. Jonathan's parents remained unmoved, their faces set in a mask of unwavering disapproval. Jonathan, you're being unreasonable, their father said, his voice cold and dismissive. You need to let this go. Forgive Mike. For the sake of the family, Jonathan repeated, his voice laced with venom. You want me to forgive him? After everything he's done? After everything you've done? He turned away, his heart heavy with a profound sense of disillusionment. He had spent his entire life trying to earn their approval, their love, their respect. But they had never seen him, never truly appreciated his worth. I'm done, he declared, his voice firm and resolute. I'm done with this family. I'm done with all of you. He walked away, leaving them standing in the opulent chalet, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. He didn't look back. He couldn't. He had finally reached his breaking point, the moment where the weight of their toxicity became too unbearable to carry. The avalanche had begun, a destructive force that would sweep away the remnants of his past, leaving behind a blank canvas upon which he could paint a new future. The aftermath of Jonathan's declaration was a chilling silence, a stark contrast to the tempest raging within him. He retreated from the opulent chalet, the symbol of his family's toxic embrace, and sought refuge in the solitude of his own cabin, a small rustic dwelling nestled amidst the towering pines. The isolation, however, did little to quell the storm of emotions that battered him relentlessly. The betrayal, the rejection, the sheer magnitude of his loss, it was a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate him. He found himself adrift in a sea of despair, the familiar landmarks of his life submerged beneath the icy waves of heartbreak. His once vibrant spirit dimmed, his passion for snowboarding, once a source of joy and exhilaration, now felt like a distant memory. He lost his appetite, his sleep became a restless torment, and the once comforting silence of the mountains now echoed with the deafening roar of his loneliness. His professional life, once a source of pride and accomplishment, crumbled around him. He missed training sessions, neglected sponsorships, and ultimately lost his job, the very foundation of his independence ripped away. The Walker family, however, refused to let him slip away into the shadows. They descended upon him like a relentless blizzard, their voices echoing through the mountains, their presence a constant reminder of his pain. Jonathan, you're being irrational. His father's voice boomed through his phone, laced with a patronizing tone. You need to come home. We're worried about you. Worried? Jonathan scoffed, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. You're worried about your reputation. You're worried about what people will say. That's not true. His mother's voice chimed in, her tone laced with a false sweetness. We just want what's best for you. What's best for me, Jonathan repeated, his voice filled with a bitter irony. What's best for me is to be left alone, to be free from your toxicity. The phone call ended with a sharp click, a final decisive break in their communication. But their attempts to manipulate him didn't stop there. They enlisted the help of mutual friends, acquaintances, anyone who might sway him, their voices a chorus of disapproval and veiled threats. Even Sarah, the architect of his pain, reached out, her messages a desperate plea for forgiveness, a twisted attempt to salvage what was left of their shattered relationship. Jonathan, please, her text messages read, a string of desperate words that offered no consolation. I know I hurt you, but I need you. For the baby. He needs you. The audacity of her request left him speechless. She wanted him to play the role of the benevolent uncle, to pretend that nothing had happened, to accept the child of his brother, the ultimate symbol of his betrayal. Jonathan's resolve hardened. He would not be swayed by their guilt trips, their manipulations, their desperate attempts to control him. He would not allow them to dictate his life any longer. He was a lone figure against the blizzard, a solitary warrior fighting for his own sanity, his own survival. He would weather the storm, emerge stronger, and rebuild his life, piece by painful piece. The relentless blizzard of familial pressure and emotional turmoil had pushed Jonathan to his breaking point. He realized that the only way to protect himself, to reclaim his sanity, was to seek legal intervention. He would not be a victim any longer. He would become a warrior, armed with the law, to shield himself from the toxic onslaught. He sought the counsel of Emily Carter, a formidable lawyer known for her unwavering resolve and her fierce advocacy for her clients. Emily, with her sharp intellect and her no-nonsense demeanor, saw the injustice that had been inflicted upon Jonathan and vowed to fight for him. The courtroom became a battleground, a stark arena where the truth would be laid bare. Jonathan, with Emily by his side, faced his family, their faces etched with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Mr. Walker," Emily began, her voice ringing with authority, "your client has been subjected to a campaign of harassment and emotional abuse. He has been systematically undermined, his boundaries violated, his life disrupted." The Walker family's lawyer, a slick, silver-tongued adversary, attempted to paint Jonathan as the aggressor, the one who had abandoned his family, who had turned his back on their love. "Mr. Walker," he argued, his voice dripping with condescension, "is a troubled young man. He has allowed his personal issues to cloud his judgment, to sever the bonds of family." But Emily was relentless, her arguments sharp and incisive. She presented evidence of the family's relentless pressure, their attempts to manipulate and control Jonathan, their complete disregard for his emotional well-being. "This is not about family," she declared, her voice resonating through the courtroom. "This is about power and control. It's about a family that refuses to acknowledge the damage they have inflicted, the pain they have caused." The tension in the courtroom was palpable, a frozen silence that hung heavy in the air. Jonathan's parents, their faces flushed with anger, watched as their carefully constructed facade of familial harmony crumbled before their eyes. The judge, a stern, impartial figure, listened intently to the arguments, his gaze unwavering. He saw the truth, the raw, unvarnished truth that lay beneath the layers of deception and manipulation. And when the verdict was delivered, it was a resounding victory for Jonathan. The court granted a restraining order, barring Mike and his parents from any contact with him. The legal ice storm had swept through, leaving behind a clear, decisive message. Jonathan would not be silenced. He would not be broken. The courtroom victory was a turning point, a moment of liberation. Jonathan had finally broken free from the chains that had bound him for so long. He had stood his ground, faced his demons, and emerged victorious. The legal victory, though a hard-won triumph, did little to quell the simmering rage within Mike. The restraining order, intended to protect Jonathan, became a red flag to a bull, a challenge to Mike's sense of entitlement. He, the golden boy, the untouchable one, would not be denied. He disregarded the court order with a reckless abandon, his arrogance fueled by a sense of invincibility. He stalked Jonathan, his presence a constant, menacing shadow, a reminder of the unresolved conflict. One afternoon, as Jonathan sought solace in the familiar rhythm of his workout routine at the local gym, Mike materialized, his eyes blazing with a malevolent intensity. "You think a piece of paper can keep me away from you," Mike sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you can hide behind the law?" Jonathan, his muscles tense, his senses heightened, knew that a confrontation was inevitable. He braced himself, his body poised for action. "You're violating a court order, Mike," he warned, his voice low and steady. "You need to leave." "Or what?" Mike taunted, his eyes flashing with a predatory gleam. "You're going to call the cops? Run to Mommy and Daddy?" Before Jonathan could respond, Mike lunged, his fist connecting with Jonathan's jaw, the force of the blow sending him reeling. The gym, once a sanctuary, transformed into a battleground, the sounds of clanging weights replaced by the grunts and thuds of a violent altercation. Jonathan, despite his initial shock, fought back with a ferocity born of desperation. He would not be a victim any longer. He would not allow Mike to dictate his life, to violate his boundaries. The fight was brutal, a raw display of anger and resentment, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil that had plagued their lives. Punches were thrown, bodies collided, the air thick with the stench of sweat and aggression. The gym patrons, initially stunned into silence, erupted into chaos, their voices a cacophony of fear and excitement. The police arrived, sirens wailing, their presence a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. Jonathan and Mike were separated, their bodies bruised and battered, their faces etched with the raw emotions of the fight. They were taken into custody, the weight of their actions hanging heavy in the air. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, accusations, and counter-accusations. Jonathan, despite being the victim of Mike's initial assault, found himself facing charges of assault, his reputation tarnished, his life further complicated. The reckless skier, Mike, had once again managed to manipulate the situation, turning Jonathan into the aggressor, the one who had crossed the line. The injustice of it all was a bitter pill to swallow, a cruel reminder of the power dynamics that had shaped their lives. The weight of the legal battle, the emotional wreckage, and the constant reminders of his shattered past had taken their toll on Jonathan. He felt like a prisoner in his own life, trapped in a cycle of pain and resentment. The once vibrant landscapes of Whistler, the majestic mountains that had been his sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a constant reminder of his broken dreams. He realized that the only way to truly heal, to reclaim his life, was to leave, to sever all ties with the toxic people who had caused him so much pain. The offer from his company to transfer to their Vancouver office came as a lifeline, a chance to start anew, to escape the shadows of his past. The decision was not easy. It meant leaving behind the only life he had ever known, the mountains he loved, the community he had grown up in. But the alternative, to remain trapped in a cycle of pain and resentment, was unbearable. He made the break clean and decisive. He informed his parents of his decision, his voice firm and resolute, devoid of any trace of emotion. "I'm leaving," he stated, his words echoing through the empty chalet. "I'm moving to Vancouver. I won't be contacting you again." His parents, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and anger, attempted to reason with him, to guilt-trip him, to manipulate him once more. But Jonathan was unmoved. He had built walls around his heart, walls that would not be breached. He also severed all contact with Sarah, ignoring her desperate pleas for forgiveness, her attempts to rekindle their shattered relationship. He refused to be a part of her life, a silent observer of the child that symbolized his betrayal. "I can't do this, Sarah," he texted, his words cold and final. "I can't be a part of your life, not anymore." The messages went unanswered, lost in the digital void, a symbol of their broken connection. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of regret, but he knew it was the right decision. He packed his belongings, the physical remnants of his past, and left Whistler, the snow-covered peaks fading into the distance. As he drove away, he felt a sense of liberation, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He had made a choice, a difficult choice, but a necessary one. He had chosen himself, his own well-being, his own sanity. He had chosen to break free from the chains of toxicity, to build a new life, a life free from the shadows of his past. His heart, once frozen by pain and betrayal, began to thaw, a slow, gradual process of healing. He knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but he was ready. He was ready to face the future, to embrace the unknown, to build a life worthy of his own resilience. Vancouver, with its vibrant energy and breathtaking scenery, offered Jonathan a clean slate, a chance to rebuild his life from the ashes of his past. The city's bustling streets, the towering skyscrapers, the sprawling parks, it was a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of Whistler, a symphony of urban life that both invigorated and intimidated him. He immersed himself in his work, channeling his energy into the challenges and opportunities that his new position presented. The long hours, the demanding projects, the constant interaction with new colleagues, it was a welcome distraction from the ghosts of his past. He found solace in the city's diverse cultural scene, exploring art galleries, attending concerts, and discovering hidden gems in the labyrinthine streets. He embraced the anonymity that Vancouver offered, the freedom to be just Jonathan, without the baggage of his family's reputation or the whispers of his past. Slowly, tentatively, he began to rebuild his life, piece by piece. He joined a local snowboarding club, rediscovering his passion for the sport, finding camaraderie in the shared thrill of carving through fresh powder. He ventured into the mountains surrounding Vancouver, exploring new slopes, new trails, new challenges. He met new people, individuals who saw him for who he was, not for who his family was. He formed genuine friendships, bonds built on mutual respect and shared interests. He discovered a sense of belonging, a feeling he had long craved but never truly experienced. One evening, as he sat in a cozy pub, surrounded by his newfound friends, he felt a wave of contentment wash over him. He had found his tribe, his people, his sanctuary. "You seem different, Jonathan," one of his friends remarked, his eyes filled with genuine curiosity. "More relaxed, more at peace." Jonathan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I am," he replied, his voice filled with a quiet confidence. "I've finally found my place." He had learned to let go of the bitterness, the resentment, the anger that had consumed him for so long. He had learned to forgive, not for them, but for himself. He had learned to embrace the present, to cherish the moments of joy and connection, to build a future filled with hope and possibility. He still carried the scars of his past, the memories of betrayal and heartbreak, but they no longer defined him. They were simply a part of his story, a chapter in his life that had shaped him, but not broken him. He had found his balance, his equilibrium, his happiness. He had found his new slopes, a fresh start, a chance to create a life worthy of his own resilience. The journey to healing was not linear. It was a winding path filled with detours, setbacks, and moments of profound self-reflection. Jonathan learned to confront his past, to acknowledge the pain, the anger, the betrayal, without allowing it to consume him. He learned to forgive, not for the sake of those who had wronged him, but for his own peace of mind. He realized that holding on to resentment was like carrying a heavy burden, a weight that hindered his ability to move forward. He learned to release the negative emotions, to accept the past as a part of his story, a chapter that had shaped him but did not define him. He also learned to forgive himself, to let go of the guilt and self-blame that had plagued him for so long. He understood that he was not responsible for the actions of others, that he had done his best in a difficult situation. With his newfound sense of peace and clarity, Jonathan felt a desire to share his story, to inspire others who were struggling with their own challenges. He began speaking at local events, sharing his experiences of overcoming adversity, of finding strength in vulnerability. His words resonated with audiences, his honesty and vulnerability creating a powerful connection. He became a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the human capacity for healing and growth. He spoke of the importance of self-care, of setting boundaries, of seeking support. He emphasized the power of forgiveness, not as an act of condoning wrongdoing, but as a means of liberating oneself from the shackles of resentment. His message was simple yet profound. You are not defined by your past. You are not limited by your circumstances. You have the power to create a life of purpose and meaning. One day, Jonathan decided to embark on a challenging hike, a trek to the summit of a mountain overlooking Vancouver. The climb was arduous, the path steep and treacherous, but Jonathan was determined. As he ascended, he reflected on his journey, the trials he had faced, the lessons he had learned. He thought of his family, the pain they had caused, the bridges he had burned. He thought of Sarah, the betrayal, the heartbreak. But he also thought of the resilience he had discovered, the strength he had found within himself. He thought of the new life he had built, the friendships he had forged, the purpose he had found. When he finally reached the summit, he stood in awe of the breathtaking panorama, the city sprawling below, the mountains stretching into the distance. He felt a sense of triumph, a feeling of accomplishment. He had conquered his past. He had climbed his own mountain. He had reached the summit of resilience. He knew that the future held challenges, but he also knew that he had the strength to face them, the courage to persevere. He raised his arms, embracing the wind, the sun, the vast expanse of the sky. He was Jonathan Walker, and he was free.